"You don't belong here." A sharp voice sliced through the yacht club lobby, echoing against polished wood and the faint clatter of silverware from the nearby cafe. Morgan Ellis, in faded jeans and a pale blue polo, paused mid-step, her eyes calm, almost detached, scanning the room as if she had expected this exact moment. The staff at the front desk shifted uneasily, whispering to each other, checking screens, trying to mask their discomfort with practiced indifference. But Morgan's presence was magnetic, the quiet kind that makes people hesitate. A sleek brass bell rang somewhere behind her, catching the attention of a few early arrivals, their brows furrowed in curiosity. The club manager, a tall man in a crisp blazer with a faintly smug expression, leaned slightly over the counter, arms crossed, and repeated, "Are you sure you have the right access? This isn't open to the public." Morgan's lips curved subtly, a half-smile that didn't need words, and she reached into her bag for a slim tablet, sliding it across the counter with deliberate slowness. The staff recoiled slightly, caught off guard by the quiet authority radiating from her. Around them, guests began to notice the tension, a few raising smartphones to capture the unfolding scene, whispers starting to ripple like waves. One young woman near the water view murmured to her friend, "Is she the owner?" Morgan didn't respond immediately. She simply stood, hands folded over the tablet, eyes locking briefly with the manager's, holding a gaze that conveyed more than words ever could. The air in the lobby felt charged, as if the sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows had thickened into a tangible presence, pressing down on the room, demanding attention. The manager's voice rose slightly, sharp but faltering under the weight of unseen authority. "You'll need to verify your reservation and credentials before proceeding any further." Morgan tilted her head, a flicker of amusement in her gaze, and tapped her tablet once, sending a signal that set unseen wheels in motion. A soft buzz came through her earpiece, confirming recognition. The system flagged her as the Marina's registered owner. The staff froze, confusion and disbelief mixing across their faces, the earlier smugness evaporating instantly. Guests leaned in, murmurs escalating into a low hum of astonishment. Morgan's half-smile deepened, serene, confident, a calm storm gathering at the center of the room. The tension held, suspended, each second stretching as if the lobby itself were waiting for the revelation to land fully. One of the staff, shifting nervously, whispered to a colleague, "Did she just?" But Morgan's gaze never left the manager, silent yet commanding. Outside, the marina glimmered in the morning sun, boats lined in neat rows, the gentle sway of the water mirroring the sudden ripple of change inside. Morgan finally spoke, her voice measured, cutting through the whispering. "You thought this was a club. It's mine." The words landed like a quiet verdict, and in that moment, the balance of power shifted imperceptibly but irrevocably. Guests exchanged glances, phones raised, caught between awe and disbelief, as the subtle authority of Morgan Ellis settled over the yacht club, leaving the staff frozen, the atmosphere charged with the promise of a reckoning that had only just begun. The murmurs in the lobby intensified as Morgan Ellis remained still, her hands lightly resting on the tablet, calm and unyielding. The staff exchanged uneasy glances, the manager's jaw tightening as if the words she had just spoken carried invisible weight that pressed on every corner of the room. Guests shifted in their seats and along the balcony, phones raised discreetly, capturing the tension in real time, their whispers weaving a fabric of anticipation that stretched across the polished marble floors. Morgan's eyes, steady and unwavering, scanned the faces around her, reading the room with the precision of someone who had navigated far more challenging arenas than this yacht club lobby. One of the servers, a young man with a freshly pressed white shirt, muttered under his breath, "I think we messed up," and the manager shot him a glance that faltered, a flash of uncertainty breaking through the previously composed facade. Morgan did not respond to their murmurs or to the slight coughs meant to draw her attention. Instead, she let the room breathe itself into tension, each second amplifying the invisible authority she exuded. Outside, the marina sparkled in the late morning sun, the boats rocking gently against their moorings, a soft contrast to the electricity building inside. A middle-aged woman, leaning against the railing near the water view, whispered to her companion, "She is not just anyone. That confidence. And the words trailed off as her eyes followed Morgan's composed movements. The manager cleared his throat, louder this time, attempting to reassert control. We will need to verify your credentials, your access, everything, before you proceed further. Morgan's gaze sharpened slightly, a flicker of resolve passing through the calm. She tapped her tablet once more, and a quiet tone from her earpiece confirmed that all recognition protocols had been activated. The staff froze, a collective intake of breath moving through them as their confidence faltered. Morgan's half-smile deepened subtly, the kind that hints at preparation and understanding beyond the visible. Guests began to lean in, shifting their attention entirely to her, their collective focus creating an almost palpable gravity that drew every eye. The manager stepped back slightly, his posture rigid, unsure how to navigate the unfolding reality. Morgan's presence, calm yet undeniable, had transformed the atmosphere. The lobby no longer felt like a place of casual leisure, but a stage set for revelation. As she raised her head slightly, letting her gaze pass over the room with deliberate care, a quiet ripple of acknowledgment moved through the crowd, the kind that precedes respect rather than mere astonishment. Every subtle movement, every measured breath, every pause in her stance communicated control, a command over space and perception that left the staff and guests alike reeling silently. The sunlight glinted off the tablet and the polished surfaces, highlighting her composed demeanor, signaling that she was entirely aware of the currents shifting beneath the social surface. Morgan's quiet authority set the tempo, the room hanging on her presence, every whisper and glance charged with unspoken acknowledgment of a power not yet fully revealed, yet impossible to deny. The soft clinking of glasses and distant water lapping against the docks contrasted with the sharp, taut tension inside, creating an uneasy harmony that underscored the silent dominance of Morgan Ellis as she prepared to guide the unfolding truth in the next moments. The tension in the yacht club lobby continued to mount as Morgan Ellis shifted her weight subtly, the faint sound of polished shoes on marble echoing in the quiet. Staff members whispered urgently to one another, their eyes darting to the tablet that Morgan held, the device now a symbol of authority more potent than any uniform or badge. A cluster of guests had gathered near the water-facing windows, their attention fully captured by her presence, murmurs of curiosity mixing with disbelief as they watched the subtle exchange of glances and gestures. The manager cleared his throat, attempting once more to reclaim control. This is not standard procedure. You cannot just bypass verification like this. But his voice faltered under the weight of her composed gaze. Morgan raised her chin slightly, her calm aura amplifying the uncertainty in the room. She tapped the tablet again, and a soft chime indicated that the recognition system had validated her credentials, her ownership flagged and recorded in real time. The staff froze, every muscle tensing as the implications settled, the manager's previously confident stance now wavering. Guests, sensing the shift, began to whisper among themselves, some raising phones, recording subtle reactions, others leaning forward as if trying to catch a moment that would define the story they would tell later. Morgan's eyes swept the lobby methodically, observing the subtle tremors of surprise and concern across the staff, the quick adjustments in posture, the nervous shuffling of papers and devices as they tried to mask their recognition of the reality before them. She let the silence stretch, a deliberate pause that carried the weight of authority and patience, a quiet pressure that demanded acknowledgment without a single raised voice. Outside, the sunlight bounced off the Marina's waters, glinting off the hulls of docked boats, casting elongated reflections into the lobby and mirroring the tension in the room. A younger guest near the entrance whispered to a friend, "She is in control. You can feel it." And the words carried, spreading like a ripple through the gathered onlookers. The manager took a hesitant step back, his eyes scanning the system, realizing that Morgan's status had been confirmed beyond any doubt. Morgan, in turn, allowed herself a small, controlled smile, her posture relaxed but commanding, signaling that she had absorbed the room's energy and transformed it into her own momentum. Every subtle gesture she made, the tilt of her head, the steady hold on the tablet, the measured pace of her movements, reinforced the authority that was now undeniable, reshaping the social hierarchy in the room, without a single loud word. Guests exchanged glances, some nodding subtly, others shifting in their seats to get a better view, their collective attention solidifying around her. The manager swallowed hard, realizing that the narrative he had controlled moments before was now slipping beyond his grasp. Morgan's presence, poised and deliberate, dominated the space, each breath, each glance conveying power, patience, and an unspoken message that the events unfolding were a testament not only to her authority, but to the inevitability of recognition and respect. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation, every movement charged, the soft lapping of the Marina outside juxtaposed against the taut energy in the lobby, signaling that the next moments would fully reveal the reach of Morgan Ellis's control over the yacht club and the unfolding narrative of power and acknowledgment. The manager straightened, his hands gripping the edge of the counter as though it were the last tether of control he possessed, but his voice wavered slightly, betraying the unraveling certainty that had carried him this far. Morgan Ellis shifted her stance subtly, the movement minimal yet precise, like the quiet adjustment of a captain at the helm, and every eye in the lobby followed her, attuned to the gravity of her presence. She spoke softly, her voice carrying over the low hum of conversation without raising volume. Every access point, every record, every detail has been verified. You are standing in a space that belongs to me. The words fell gently yet firmly, like stones in a pond, sending ripples across the staff's composure. Guests exchanged glances, some leaning on railings, others holding their phones at angles that captured the tension, their whispers layering into a chorus that mirrored the room's rising anticipation. Morgan's gaze swept across each staff member, reading their discomfort, their attempts at maintaining decorum, and she let it linger just long enough to make the weight of recognition settle in. Outside, the Marina shimmered under the bright morning sun, boats bobbing lightly against the dock, their reflections dancing across the floor-to-ceiling windows, a silent witness to the authority commanding the space within. A young man near the entryway murmured, "She is not just asserting herself. She owns this." And the words were carried inadvertently to those nearby, amplifying the collective awareness of Morgan's standing. The manager attempted another intervention, his tone firmer now. "We must follow protocol. Verification is mandatory for all activities within this club, but the steadiness in Morgan's posture and the controlled patience in her expression rendered his insistence hollow." She tapped her tablet again, the soft click reverberating faintly, signaling the final confirmation from her assistant that all privileges and access points had been activated, leaving no room for doubt. The staff's whispers tapered into silence as the implications became undeniable, their previous certainty replaced by hesitant acknowledgment. Morgan's expression remained composed, her eyes calm, yet a subtle energy radiated from her, the aura of someone who understood the rhythm of power and how to let it manifest without force. Guests leaned slightly forward, capturing the moment through lenses and eyes alike, their fascination palpable, and the young woman who had first raised her voice nodded subtly, a quiet endorsement that reinforced the momentum of recognition building around Morgan. Each step, each deliberate pause she made communicated authority, patience, and an unspoken assurance that the room's social dynamics had shifted irrevocably. The manager's posture softened imperceptibly, a recognition that the narrative he had controlled was now being guided by an unspoken but undeniable truth. Morgan's presence, poised and assured, dominated the lobby, creating a sense of inevitability, as if every detail and every person in the room were aligned to witness the unfolding acknowledgment of her position. The ambient sounds of water lapping against the Marina and the soft clinking of distant glassware contrasted with the charged stillness within the lobby, emphasizing the controlled tension she maintained. The staff, the manager, and the guests all sensed the undercurrent of authority that required neither argument nor confrontation, only recognition, and as Morgan's calm dominance held, the air seemed to settle, anticipating the next moment in which her influence and ownership would be fully realized across the yacht club. The staff at the yacht club exchanged nervous glances, their earlier composure dissolving into quiet tension as Morgan Ellis remained still, her presence commanding without a single elevated tone. Every subtle movement she made, From the precise adjustment of her grip on the tablet to the calm tilt of her chin, communicated authority that demanded recognition. Guests leaned forward, some capturing the moment with their phones, others simply watching, their whispers punctuating the still air with questions of astonishment and curiosity. The manager cleared his throat once more, attempting to regain a semblance of control. "We cannot proceed without following proper verification procedures." But the certainty in Morgan's gaze, paired with the soft confirmation from her assistant over the earpiece, made his insistence feel futile. A young woman near the glass doors murmured to her companion, "She is completely in control," and the words drifted through the lobby, gathering strength as more guests acknowledged the quiet dominance that Morgan projected. Outside, sunlight reflected off the water, casting shifting patterns across the polished marble, a serene backdrop contrasting with the charged energy inside, where every eye followed Morgan's measured movements. The staff shifted uneasily, hands fidgeting with devices and papers, their whispered discussions punctuated by hesitant glances toward the tablet and the subtle nods of acknowledgment that circulated among the guests. Morgan allowed a brief pause, letting the silence stretch, each second amplifying the sense of power that radiated from her without a single word raised. She finally lifted her eyes, sweeping across the room, noting every hesitation, every uncertain glance, and each subtle sign of recognition that her authority commanded. A middle-aged man leaning on the railing whispered to his friend, "She has the room in her control without even needing to speak loudly." And the statement spread among the observers, reinforcing the unspoken hierarchy forming in the space. The manager's posture sagged imperceptibly, the realization dawning that the room's dynamics had shifted irrevocably, that the authority he had wielded was now subtly yet decisively being redirected. Morgan's calm, deliberate presence dominated every corner of the lobby, her every gesture, every measured breath, carrying the weight of someone fully aware of the space she occupied and the influence she exerted. Guests moved slightly to gain better vantage points, their collective focus on Morgan creating an almost tangible gravity, a silent acknowledgement that the unfolding scenario was being guided by her awareness and intent. The gentle lapping of the Marina waters outside provided a soft counterpoint to the taut energy inside, emphasizing the control she held without confrontation. The staff, the manager, and the guests all sensed the inevitability in her demeanor, a power that required no argument, only quiet recognition. And as Morgan held her stance, the atmosphere in the lobby settled into a tense expectation, anticipating the moment when her influence and full authority would be fully acknowledged and the unfolding truth of her presence would ripple outward across the yacht club. The lobby settled into a strange, suspended quiet, each guest aware that something beyond routine was unfolding before them. Morgan Ellis stood with deliberate calm, the tablet resting lightly in her hands, her gaze sweeping the room as if cataloging every detail, every subtle shift of expression among the staff. The manager cleared his throat again, trying to inject authority into a space that had already begun to slip from his control, but the words sounded hollow, almost rehearsed, under the weight of Morgan's steady presence. Guests moved subtly, some leaning closer to the windows overlooking the marina, phones raised, recording fragments of the scene, their quiet murmurs punctuating the air with disbelief and anticipation. A young couple near the lounge chairs whispered, "She is not just asserting control, she commands it," and the words spread, a quiet ripple of acknowledgement traveling from group to group, touching everyone present. Morgan's posture remained poised, the calm in her stance almost electric, each movement measured and intentional, signaling awareness and patience rather than haste. She allowed a brief moment of silence to stretch, letting the staff feel the gravity of recognition settle upon them, the invisible weight of authority pressing gently yet unmistakably. Outside, the sun glinted off the marina's waters, the gentle sway of boats contrasting with the charged energy inside, reflections flickering across the polished marble floors, lending a subtle rhythm to the room's tense atmosphere. The manager shifted uneasily, glancing at his team, searching for reassurance in their hesitant expressions, but found only subtle acknowledgments of Morgan's undeniable control. She tapped the tablet lightly once more, the soft sound carrying across the lobby, signaling the final verification from her assistant that all access privileges had been confirmed, her ownership now undeniable. The staff froze, their previous confidence dissolved into quiet hesitation, each glance at Morgan reinforcing the shift in authority. Guests adjusted slightly to follow the unfolding narrative, their eyes wide with fascination, a collective recognition settling over the room like a tangible presence. Morgan allowed herself a subtle smile, one that conveyed both patience and the quiet satisfaction of inevitability, the kind that comes from fully understanding the rhythm of influence and control. The manager exhaled slowly, shoulders dropping just enough to acknowledge that the scenario he had attempted to dictate had now become something entirely beyond his control. Morgan's calm dominance permeated the space, every subtle breath, every measured step reinforcing the silent hierarchy she had established, her presence now the center around which attention, curiosity, and acknowledgment revolved. The gentle lapping of the Marina against the docks outside underscored the contrast between the serene natural environment and the taut energy within, highlighting Morgan's capacity to command without confrontation. The staff, the manager, and the gathered guests all sensed the inevitability of the unfolding recognition, a power that required no argument, only acknowledgment. And as Morgan's poised figure anchored the lobby, the subtle yet absolute authority she exuded left no doubt that the next moments would fully reveal the depth and reach of her control over the yacht club and the unfolding narrative of influence and acknowledgement. The manager's face tightened as Morgan Ellis's steady gaze held him in place, the room around them vibrating with quiet attention. Guests leaned slightly forward, phones raised subtly, capturing the silent shifts in the atmosphere, each observer aware that the balance of authority had moved unmistakably. Morgan's stance remained poised, her hands lightly resting on the tablet, every subtle motion precise, intentional, and deliberate, conveying a calm confidence that seemed to fill the entire lobby. The staff shuffled, murmuring to one another in low tones, uncertainty creeping into their posture, each glance at Morgan confirming what their intuition had begun to suspect. Control had shifted. Outside, sunlight danced across the marina waters, reflecting a fractured pattern across the polished floors, the gentle sway of the boats echoing the quiet tension within. A guest near the entrance whispered to her friend, "She does not even need to raise her voice, and yet everyone is listening." And the observation spread, weaving through the gathered crowd, reinforcing the collective sense of awareness. Morgan allowed the silence to stretch, letting the room absorb the full weight of her presence, the subtle authority that required no argument, only recognition. The manager attempted a firmer tone. "We need confirmation on every detail before any action can proceed," but his words lacked the resonance to influence the situation. Morgan tapped the tablet lightly once more, a soft click confirming that her assistant had completed the verification, her ownership recorded, her control now beyond question. The staff froze, faces reflecting a mixture of disbelief and reluctant acknowledgement, their previous certainty replaced by cautious attentiveness. Guests shifted, some leaning on the balcony railing overlooking the marina, their whispers hushed as if acknowledging the magnitude of the unfolding scenario. Morgan's eyes scanned each person in the lobby, noting every hesitation, every fleeting expression of recognition, and she let her gaze linger just enough to impress the depth of her authority. The manager exhaled, a subtle slump in his shoulders betraying his understanding that the narrative he had sought to maintain was no longer under his influence. Morgan's calm yet commanding presence dominated the space, each measured step, each poised movement reinforcing the invisible hierarchy she had established. The soft ambient sounds of water against the docks outside contrasted with the tension in the lobby, highlighting the controlled yet potent atmosphere that Morgan maintained. Guests adjusted their positions to gain better vantage points, their attention fully captured, each subtle movement conveying their silent acknowledgement of her authority. The staff, the manager, and the assembled observers all felt the weight of inevitability in the room, a power that required no confrontation, only recognition, and as Morgan maintained her composed stance, the lobby itself seemed to bend subtly to the gravity of her presence, signaling that the next moments would reveal the full extent of her influence and the acknowledgement of her rightful control. Over the yacht club. The atmosphere in the yacht club lobby had shifted completely, the earlier tension replaced by a charged anticipation that seemed to pulse with every subtle movement. Morgan Ellis remained composed, her hands resting lightly on the tablet, her eyes scanning the room with a quiet intensity that drew attention from every guest and staff member present. A low murmur ran through the onlookers as they began to grasp the magnitude of the situation, some raising their phones just enough to capture fleeting angles without interrupting the flow of the moment. The manager straightened, his posture rigid, yet the confidence he had carried before now faltered as he realized that Morgan's presence and the confirmation from her assistant over the earpiece had shifted the authority in the room entirely. Guests leaned forward slightly, their eyes reflecting curiosity and awe, as Morgan's subtle gestures communicated command without a single raised voice. She tilted her chin with deliberate care, a motion that seemed almost imperceptible but carried the weight of unspoken authority, and the staff responded instinctively, their movements tentative, restrained, as if drawn into the orbit of her calm power. The sunlight from the marina outside played across the polished marble floors, reflecting in patterns that danced softly across the lobby, creating a visual rhythm that mirrored the steady, controlled tension within. A young man near the entrance whispered to his companion, "She does not need to shout. Everyone listens." And the words carried like a ripple, spreading across the room, reinforcing the collective realization of Morgan's control. The manager attempted to reassert protocol, his voice measured but lacking conviction. "We still need verification for access to certain areas." But the subtle authority in Morgan's posture, the quiet confirmation from her assistant, and the attentive presence of the guests rendered his insistence ineffective. Morgan tapped the tablet gently, signaling that every access point and privilege had been fully verified, her ownership recorded, her control unequivocal. The staff paused, caught in a moment of reluctant acknowledgment, the earlier bravado dissolving into quiet tension, their eyes betraying a recognition that had taken root. Guests adjusted their positions, leaning subtly to see more clearly, their attention entirely on Morgan, as if the room itself had been reordered around her quiet dominance. Every measured movement, every pause in her stance, reinforced the authority she projected without confrontation, demonstrating that influence does not require force, only presence and clarity of purpose. The manager exhaled slowly, shoulders sagging almost imperceptibly, a subtle acknowledgement that the narrative he had attempted to control was no longer in his hands. Outside, the marina shimmered under the late morning sun, the gentle rocking of the boats contrasting with the taut, deliberate energy inside, highlighting the magnitude of Morgan Ellis's influence over the space. Guests and staff alike sensed the inevitability in the moment, a power that needed no argument, only recognition, and as Morgan remained poised, her quiet confidence anchored the room, signaling that the forthcoming revelation of her authority and control over the yacht club would be absolute and unquestionable. The tension in the yacht club lobby had reached a subtle crescendo, the quiet anticipation of the guests almost tangible as Morgan Ellis held her position with effortless command. Her gaze swept the room, noting every twitch of hesitation, every shift in posture, the faint tightening of hands on menus or tablets, the small glances exchanged among the staff, as if seeking reassurance that no rulebook could shield them from the reality of her presence. A soft hum of conversation rose from clusters of guests near the balcony, their whispers threading through the lobby like an undercurrent of curiosity and disbelief, capturing fragments of the quiet dominance that Morgan exuded. The manager straightened once again, attempting to impose structure, his voice firm but thin with tension. "We still require complete verification before you may proceed to certain areas." Yet the subtle authority emanating from Morgan, confirmed over the earpiece, rendered his insistence nearly irrelevant. A young guest standing near the water-facing windows whispered to his companion, "She does not raise her voice, and yet the room bends to her." And the observation spread among the surrounding guests, reinforcing the emergent acknowledgement of her influence. Morgan allowed the silence to linger, a deliberate and measured pause that emphasized the weight of recognition that now surrounded her, compelling attention without force. The sunlight from the marina outside reflected across the polished floors, shimmering in patterns that moved in gentle rhythm, paralleling the composed yet charged energy within the room. The staff fidgeted, eyes darting between Morgan and the tablet. Murmurs exchanged in hushed tones, a collective acknowledgment of the shift in hierarchy that had quietly but completely taken hold. Guests leaned slightly to gain a clearer view, some raising phones, others simply observing, each subtle movement reinforcing the shared understanding that Morgan's authority was unassailable in that moment. Her subtle smile, controlled and deliberate, suggested a calm satisfaction with the unfolding acknowledgment, a quiet assertion that patience and awareness often held more power than any outward display of dominance. The manager exhaled slowly, shoulders lowering in an imperceptible surrender to the moment, the realization dawning that the narrative he had hoped to maintain was now fully under Morgan's quiet guidance. Morgan's stance, composed and assured, anchored the room, the lobby itself seeming to adjust to her presence, the space filled with a tangible respect that required no verbal assertion. The soft ambient sounds of water lapping against the marina and the distant echo of footsteps along the polished walkways outside contrasted with the taut, deliberate energy within, emphasizing the controlled influence she maintained. Every subtle gesture, every shift of attention, reinforced the authority she projected, demonstrating that power often resides in the calm, deliberate command of space and perception. Guests and staff alike sensed the inevitability of the forthcoming resolution, an unspoken acknowledgment that the next moments would fully reveal the depth of Morgan Ellis's control and the acknowledgment of her rightful presence at the yacht club, a transformation complete without a single raised voice or overt display of confrontation. The lobby seemed to breathe as Morgan Ellis held her calm, commanding presence, the subtle rhythm of the room responding to her measured stance. Guests leaned in, adjusting their positions, some tapping quietly on their phones, capturing the unfolding recognition of authority without breaking the fluidity of the moment. Staff members shifted uneasily, glancing at one another, their murmured exchanges thin and hesitant, as if each word carried the weight of acknowledgment they had not yet fully reconciled. The manager exhaled, attempting to reclaim structure. "We require formal verification before any further access is granted." But the tone lacked the resonance to counter the quiet certainty radiating from Morgan, confirmed over her earpiece. Her eyes scanned the lobby, noting the subtle signs of realization on every face, the micro-expressions of recognition and surprise, and she allowed the pause to extend, letting the gravity of her presence settle into the space. Sunlight poured through the large windows overlooking the marina, reflecting off the water in glimmers that moved gently across the polished floors, a serene contrast to the concentrated energy within. A young woman standing near the railing whispered to her companion, "She is not just standing here. She is in command of this room." And the words spread among the observers, reinforcing the collective sense of respect forming in the space. Morgan shifted her weight slightly, her hands lightly touching the tablet, and the soft click signaled that all access points and privileges had been confirmed by her assistant, her ownership formally recognized. The staff froze, caught between disbelief and the necessity of acknowledgement. The manager's earlier confidence dissolved into careful restraint, his body language betraying the recognition of the subtle authority she wielded. Guests adjusted their stances, leaning forward to observe more clearly, each subtle movement reflecting engagement and quiet validation of Morgan's control. Every deliberate breath, every controlled gesture she made radiated composure, clarity, and unspoken influence, demonstrating that authority does not require volume but a presence that commands attention. The gentle sound of water against the marina docks and the distant echo of footsteps outside contrasted with the taut energy inside, highlighting the potency of her calm dominance. Morgan's subtle smile suggested satisfaction with the room's acknowledgement, a quiet assurance that the hierarchy had shifted definitively, and that the unfolding narrative of her influence was now beyond dispute. The staff, the manager, and the guests all sensed the inevitability in her movements, the unspoken authority that shaped the moment, and as she remained poised, the lobby seemed to align naturally with her presence, signaling that the next moments would reveal the full extent of her command and the absolute recognition of her role within the yacht club. Morgan Ellis finally raised her hand slightly, signaling her assistant to finalize the verification, and a soft, confirming tone echoed through her earpiece, signaling that every record, every credential, and every access point had been validated and acknowledged. The staff, frozen moments before in quiet disbelief, now exchanged glances that reflected a dawning recognition, their previous confidence giving way to subtle, careful acknowledgment of her authority. Guests shifted in their seats, leaning forward to observe, some capturing the moment on their phones, while others simply absorbed the tension and the unspoken transformation occurring in the room. The manager exhaled slowly, realizing that the balance of power had irrevocably shifted. His attempts at control now softened into hesitant compliance, his posture a muted testament to the undeniable influence Morgan now exerted. Outside, the marina shimmered under the late morning sun, the gentle sway of the boats contrasting with the taut energy inside, reflecting the quiet dominance that Morgan projected across the lobby. A young woman near the railing whispered to her companion, "She is not asserting authority, she embodies it," and the observation spread quietly, reinforcing the subtle but undeniable shift in social hierarchy. Morgan remained poised, her movements deliberate and measured, each gesture communicating awareness and control, each pause amplifying the weight of recognition settling over the staff and guests alike. The soft murmur of conversations blended with the distant sounds of water against the docks, highlighting the contrast between calm natural rhythms and the charged energy inside the lobby, a controlled environment now aligned to her presence. The staff shifted tentatively, careful in their movements, each glance at the tablet, and at Morgan confirming what they could no longer ignore. Her authority was absolute and fully documented. Guests leaned slightly, capturing angles and reactions, their attention fully absorbed in the unfolding acknowledgment of her power. Morgan's calm smile, subtle and deliberate, suggested a quiet satisfaction with the moment, a serene assertion that her patience and awareness had guided the room into alignment without confrontation. The manager, shoulders slightly lowered, seemed to accept the reality that the narrative he had tried to control was now fully under Morgan's influence, and that the social order of the lobby had shifted decisively in her favor. Every breath, every small movement, every subtle glance reinforced her presence, demonstrating that control does not require volume or aggression, only clarity, patience, and the ability to command recognition through composed authority. The lobby itself felt subtly transformed, the air charged yet controlled, every observer aware that the next moments would fully reveal the extent of Morgan Ellis's influence over the yacht club and the confirmation of her rightful position, a transformation that required no theatrics, only the undeniable acknowledgement of her presence and ownership. The lobby had reached a quiet equilibrium, a stillness punctuated only by the soft hum of the marina outside and the occasional shuffle of attentive guests. Morgan Ellis remained at the center, her posture impeccable, hands lightly resting on the tablet as she allowed the room to absorb the reality of her presence. The staff, once confident in their assumed authority, now moved with a careful deliberation, their eyes cast downward or toward each other, acknowledging the undeniable shift in hierarchy without a single word spoken. The manager exhaled slowly, a subtle slump in his shoulders signaling the surrender of pretense, a recognition that the narrative he had tried to dictate was now fully guided by Morgan's composed authority. Guests leaned forward, some whispering softly, others keeping silent, but recording the moment, their fascination and curiosity creating a collective energy that filled the room with tension and awe. The sunlight across the marina reflected on the polished marble floors, casting shifting patterns that mirrored the careful, deliberate dominance Morgan projected. She tilted her head slightly, scanning the lobby, her gaze pausing on each staff member and guest with precision, noting hesitation, acknowledgement, and the subtle shifts in demeanor. The staff's murmurs had tapered into silence, replaced by a quiet awareness of the authority that radiated from her, a presence that demanded recognition without a single raised voice. A young woman near the glass windows whispered to her friend, "She does not need to say anything. Everyone understands." and the sentiment quietly circulated among the observers, reinforcing the room's consensus of her control. Morgan allowed a subtle pause, letting the acknowledgement settle fully over the lobby, the gentle lapping of the Marina outside accentuating the calm, deliberate power she held. The manager shifted uncomfortably, his movements measured now, careful not to disrupt the balance that Morgan had established. Guests adjusted their stances, leaning slightly to observe, their attention fully captured, the subtle energy in the room holding them rapt. Every breath she took, every small gesture, radiated composure and unspoken influence, showing that authority could be claimed through presence and patience rather than confrontation. The staff, the manager, and the guests all responded instinctively to the quiet command she exerted, an acknowledgement that transformed the social dynamics of the space without a single overt declaration. Morgan's calm smile suggested satisfaction with the unfolding acknowledgement, a controlled satisfaction that spoke to the inevitability of recognition. The atmosphere, charged yet controlled, carried a sense of anticipation, as if the next moments would confirm the full extent of her authority and influence, solidifying her presence in the yacht club as both subtle and absolute, a quiet but unassailable power that left the entire room aligned with her unspoken command. The lobby of the yacht club had transformed entirely, a space once defined by routine now alive with a quiet, undeniable acknowledgement of authority. Morgan Ellis stood at the center, her posture poised, every gesture deliberate, as her presence radiated a calm, yet commanding energy that seemed to settle over every corner of the room. The staff, previously confident in their procedural control, now moved carefully, each action measured, each glance toward her filled with reluctant recognition, their earlier assumptions dissolved in the face of undeniable verification. Guests adjusted their positions subtly, some leaning on railings, others holding phones to capture the moment, their whispers soft yet insistent, carrying observations of astonishment and understanding that spread through the room in an invisible current. The manager exhaled slowly, a quiet concession to the shift in balance, shoulders relaxing slightly as he acknowledged the authority that Morgan embodied without confrontation or raised voice. The gentle reflections of sunlight across the marina glinted on the polished floors, echoing the steady rhythm of attention focused on her, and the subtle movement of boats outside mirrored the calm, deliberate energy within the lobby. Morgan allowed a brief pause, letting the recognition permeate fully, her eyes scanning the assembled guests and staff, noting every micro-expression, every subtle indication of acceptance, and letting it solidify the change that had quietly, yet completely, taken hold. A young man near the entrance whispered to his companion, "She has the room in her command," without even speaking loudly, and the observation rippled through the crowd, reinforcing the emergent hierarchy. Morgan tilted her head slightly, a half-smile appearing, signaling quiet satisfaction with the acknowledgement she had cultivated, the type that comes from understanding the rhythm of power and how to let it manifest naturally. The staff shifted cautiously, following her unspoken lead, while guests remained attentive, their eyes fixed on the unfolding clarity of control. The soft lapping of water against the docks outside contrasted with the taut, controlled energy in the lobby, highlighting the difference between serenity and the quiet force of recognition that Morgan held. Each movement, each pause, each subtle glance reinforced her authority, demonstrating that influence need not be loud to be complete, that presence and patience could command a room with more weight than any assertion of power. The manager, staff, and guests alike absorbed the shift fully, every unspoken acknowledgement, every tentative adjustment in posture contributing to a collective understanding that the space had been claimed by a calm, deliberate, and inarguable presence. Morgan's quiet authority anchored the room, a measured control that resonated without sound, every breath, every small action communicating power, patience, and inevitability. The atmosphere, charged yet contained, held the anticipation of the next steps, signaling that her influence and acknowledgement as the rightful authority over the yacht club had become absolute, unassailable, and recognized by all present. A transformation complete in subtlety, but total in effect.